Ooh, fancy. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our virtual mindful recovery group. My name is Matt Mitchell. I am the Prevention Services Manager with the City of Somerville's Health and Human Services Department. And on behalf of the City of Somerville's Health and Human Services Department, we welcome you guys to join us tonight for this group, as well as Julia, who I'll allow her to introduce herself shortly. But we're very excited to have her. I think it was a cool opportunity that we kind of collaborated on, thanks to social media, actually. So I'm going to make the shameless plug. If you don't follow us on Instagram already, make sure you do, at Somerville Prevention. That's where you will find all of our related topics, education, and events as well. We're excited to do this. This is actually part one of it. So we're hoping to do maybe another one down the road, depending on how people feel this goes. No pressure. But we're excited to see it, something new, a little bit different for us. But I think it's going to be something that a lot of people will enjoy. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Julia and she can introduce herself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you to everyone who's here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm so grateful to be part of this community and to be joining. My name is Julia Schechter. I'm a clinical social worker and psychotherapist in the local area. And I'm also a yoga teacher, and I focus primarily on trauma-sensitive yoga. So that means a type of yoga that is specifically emphasizing choice and listening to one's body, as opposed to the type of maybe traditional studio types of yoga class where the class is cued and you kind of follow along with the teacher. So I'll be intentionally using language like, perhaps you would like to try this, or perhaps you'd like to experiment, intentionally very choice-based language, really empowering you to kind of listen to your body and see what you need to do and what you want to do. And if something feels good, go for it. If it doesn't, that's totally fine too. And if you want to do all of it, none of it, if you want to just be part of the community, that's totally great. So before we get into the actual practice, which I'll be calling them forms, it's more of a neutral term as opposed to maybe poses. But I was hoping maybe we could just go around, if people feel comfortable, maybe just your first name and what you're hoping to get out of today's class. So I can kind of tailor it to people's wants, needs, what they'd like to gain. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Whoever feels comfortable going first.
I'm Ted.
Hi, Ted.
I'm over here in the Veterans Services Department.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you.
I can go next. My name is Bonnie, and I'm the director of the Six City Tobacco Initiative. And I'm hoping to get out of this some more tools in my toolbox for stress relief, because my job is quite stressful. So I need a way to unwind and connect to myself better.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
I'll go next. My name is Lily. I'm the Substance Misuse Prevention Coordinator, and I'm looking to just find ways to ground myself throughout the day. I think that could be really helpful. Just like what Bonnie was saying, our jobs are pretty stressful, so it would be nice to learn some things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Thank you.
I can go next. Matt, as I said, and I'm just excited to see and experience this. I think it's a little bit different than something I've ever really experienced before. And I think it's going to be something that's helpful in some of the things people have said about coping and kind of grounding yourself and doing it in maybe like a little bit of an easier way in just your chair, versus having to get a yoga mat or something. I don't think I could do that.
That's one of the cool things about this is that it's all chair-based, and I love that part of it because it makes it so much more accessible for folks. Like, you don't need fancy clothes, you don't need a fancy mat, you don't need to go to some fancy place to practice this. You can do this anywhere. And so my hope is that people maybe take one thing and are able to practice it. But thanks, Matt.
I can go next. My name is Lovely Heller-Botari, and I'm the program director with Somerville Cares About Prevention. And I think I'm looking for some new embodiment experiences.
Okay,
So, or practices.
sure. Awesome, thank you.
My name's Anne, and I'm a resident of Somerville. And I'm interested in doing something at 7 o'clock at night. The idea of that really interests me
Wonderful.
because I'm doing better on sleeping, but just if it's possible that I can go to sleep after I do this, it would be great. And if I can't, I
Wonderful.
won't. But that was what I wanted. What I wanted to get out of it was to find out if it was compatible with then going to bed.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
sometimes when things are really stressful, you don't sleep, or I don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. My hope is that this is nice and relaxing and we'll go slow, kind of giving enough time to check in with our bodies and see how we're feeling. And I'll practice it right here with you. And we can check in and, again, as I mentioned before, it's all choice-based. So if there's any part that doesn't feel comfortable, skip it, omit it, do something else. It's your body. You totally have a choice as to what you do with it. And then we can just go from there. And at the end, I would love to check in again and just see how that felt, see what people thought. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. So we'll be doing about 4, 5, 6 forms, depending on the time. And it's all chair based. At times I might have my eyes closed as I'm talking. Sometimes it helps me kind of focus inwards, and that, I invite you to do the same if that's helpful, or if it's more helpful to keep your eyes open, whatever feels best for you. Okay. So just to get started, the way that I like to start this practice is just by noticing how your body feels. So perhaps just noticing how it feels to sit, how it feels to have your body supported. Maybe any points of tension or tightness or any other sensations that you notice in your body. Not necessarily labeling them as good or bad, just perhaps noticing them, their sensations. Perhaps just noticing how your body is feeling in this moment. Perhaps you notice your breath. I have my feet on a carpeted floor, so I'm just noticing what my feet feel like on the carpet. And maybe you notice if you're wearing shoes, if you're barefoot, if you're wearing socks, whatever, whatever the situation is. Just noticing how your feet feel in connection to the floor. And I think particularly when we're stressed or experiencing a bit more emotion that might feel challenging for us, this is just a really nice way to ground and center for a bit. Perhaps you notice how your body feels, your torso, how if it's maybe lifting, maybe if you feel the top of your head stretching up, and what that feels like in relation to your body. What it feels like to notice your body lifting up towards the ceiling. Maybe you notice any points of tension in your neck. This is typically when I start like rolling out my shoulders and my neck because, oh, I'm really been clenching all day. Yeah, just noticing it. Just want to welcome Dolores to our practice.
Hi.
Dolores, if it's okay with you, we'll be recording this.
Okay,
Is that all right?
sure.
Okay. So we had just started our practice of noticing our feet on the floor and just noticing what it feels like to be supported on whatever surface we're sitting on, and perhaps different points of contact that are supporting you, and perhaps how your body feels if you think about lifting your torso up towards the sky. Just checking in with how your body feels. And I'm going to intentionally leave moments of silence where I'm not talking so that you're able to check in with your body. It's not a connection issue. I'm intentionally being a bit silent. Perhaps you notice maybe if your hands are holding any tension, your feet maybe tightening and then releasing a bit. It's up to you. It's totally your choice what you do with your body. Maybe just noticing any tension that's held. Noticing anything at all. That's okay. And so moving on to the next form, you can stay seated. It's a fully seated practice. And perhaps noticing what it feels like to tilt your head to one side. So thinking of bringing your ear toward your shoulder in a lateral movement. Perhaps you notice some stretch on the side of your neck that is not bending towards your shoulder. And recognizing that you have a choice of when you want to switch, and you can listen to your body and what your body needs. And you have a choice of how much to tilt. Perhaps recognizing what it's like to have a choice. After so many months of a pandemic, we were living in this place where we didn't really have a whole lot of choice because things were limited with what we could do. And bringing it into the body of recognizing that you have a choice of how you want to move, how you want to interact with your body. Perhaps moving your neck in a more circular fashion, if that feels accessible. Maybe doing half circles, full, totally up to you. Noticing that you have a choice with the speed of movement. Perhaps you notice your breath. And if you'd like, after bringing your neck to a more neutral position, neutral form, perhaps experimenting with what it would be like to tilt your chin up towards the ceiling. And perhaps you notice a stretch, maybe in your throat, maybe in your neck, maybe in other parts of your body. And checking in with yourself what this feels like. And then if you'd like, returning your neck back to a more neutral form and perhaps looking down, shifting your gaze down towards the floor and perhaps bringing your chin toward your chest. And perhaps noticing a stretch in your neck and upper back. I always feel some sensation there when I do this. It always feels for me like a stretch and a relief. And maybe playing around with those different variations of what it's like to move your head up and down and notice what that feels like for your body. And of course, recognizing that you have a choice of whether you want to do any of this at all, or if you just want to be here, and that's totally fine too. If you'd like to add a hand as a support, just gently supporting your head, that might bring a bit more of a stretch. Certainly if that doesn't feel good, don't do it. But this just might add a little bit more of a stretch. And perhaps just recognizing how many choices you can make with just this movement, just this form. When you feel ready, perhaps we bring our head and neck back to a more neutral form. And for the next form, I was thinking to bring hands onto the shoulders and perhaps just noticing what this feels like. And if you'd like, perhaps moving in a circular direction, one direction or another. If you want to alternate, that's totally fine too. Just experimenting with this. Perhaps noticing any sort of stretch or sensation in your body. Perhaps noticing that you can switch directions if you want to. You can move in the same direction. One arm can go in one, the other can go in the other. That's totally fine. Whatever your body needs. Perhaps noticing that you can make the circle smaller, bigger. There's so many different ways to move in this. Perhaps it's maybe a closing and an opening. Whatever feels accessible for your body, and really tuning in perhaps to listening to what your body needs. Perhaps adding in a neck stretch or any other type of stretch. Perhaps from there, we experiment with what it would be like to, I don't know if you can see the tops of my hands in this, but stretching your hands up to the ceiling and perhaps noticing maybe one at a time or both, either way. Noticing just what it feels like to lift both of your arms and stretch up. Perhaps just noticing a bit of a stretch in the side of your body, maybe in your shoulders also. And just noticing what this feels like. And perhaps you stretch one hand at a time, one arm at a time. Perhaps that creates more of a stretch on each side. Depending on the, I guess, height of your hands, that might intensify the stretch. Playing around with how much you want to bend your elbows with this. Recognizing all the different kinds of movement that you can make here. It's incorporating your neck. Perhaps you notice what it feels like to have your arms above your head, maybe in a way that we don't normally have our arms. Just noticing what that feels like. Perhaps you notice what your breathing feels like. And of course, feel free to drop your arms or move in any other way. I know it can create a pretty intense sensation keeping your arms up. Perhaps as you lift, maybe you notice your feet grounding into the floor. Maybe you just notice that juxtaposition of one part of you lifting and the other part grounding. I think particularly when we're stressed or maybe feel anxious or need just a moment to ground. I love this. I'm like a big fan of just stretching your body in different ways and noticing different points of connection while I feel grounded and stretched. And of course, please feel free and feel welcome to nourish yourself however you need through this practice. And maybe we just take a moment when you feel ready. Perhaps we just notice how our bodies feel in this moment. And particularly noticing my feet on the floor and what that feels like, and my body being supported by the chair that I'm sitting in. And perhaps you notice anything around you, any smells, any temperature of the room, anything like that, bringing in the mindful component into this practice. And just checking in with yourself. Perhaps you notice any thoughts that you're having. That's okay. Perhaps you notice the rate of breath, maybe the depth of breath. And perhaps you notice your heart rate. Perhaps you notice any thoughts of anything. It's the end of the day, checking in with yourself. For me, I always feel a little bit nervous when I teach, so I'm noticing that my heart rate is a little bit higher than it normally is. I'm noticing a bit of anxiety, and that's okay. It can be a bit anxiety provoking to do something new, and just want to name that for folks in case that's perhaps coming up for you, trying something different. Anxiety and multiple feelings at a time, and all of that can exist together. Perhaps from here, we experiment with what it would feel like to lift one foot up off the ground. So as we're sitting, so my legs are at just about a 90-degree angle, perhaps experimenting, just lifting one foot off the ground and noticing, I'm sorry, you can't see below the screen, but my foot is maybe 3 or 4 inches off the ground. Just noticing what that feels like. Switching when you'd like to. Alternating, it's up to you. Perhaps noticing any other sensations that might be in response to lifting a leg. Again, recognizing the choice aspect of you can choose how fast to move, how much to lift, not to lift at all. All of that's completely fine. And this whole practice is an experimentation of how your body feels and just noticing how different movements feel, perhaps noticing how the breath feels. I often notice that I'm holding my breath, and for me, that's a cue that I need to start breathing so I don't pass out. Just noticing what that feels like for you. And so often in yoga classes, traditional studio classes, breath is cued, and I intentionally don't want to do that, so that you breathe in a way that is comfortable for you, and that you trust that you can breathe in a way that feels good. And perhaps you notice if anything feels tight, if anything is clenched. And maybe just intentionally noticing what it would feel like to release that. So often our body reacts unconsciously to these anxiety, stress-provoking situations, and we might respond without even noticing. People clench their jaw, their shoulders, maybe their hands, anything like that. Just noticing what that's like. And for the next form, if you'd like, I'm going to shift my camera down just a little bit so you can see. I'm going to place my right hand, and I invite you to follow along if you'd like, if this feels accessible. Place my right hand on my left knee, and very gently, I'm going to turn toward my left side. And if your hand is on your knee, on your kneecap, just be thoughtful of perhaps not pressing down too hard. That can cause some problems for your knee. So maybe on the outside of your leg, maybe that feels a bit more accessible and safe. And perhaps playing with how far you turn, any other movements that you'd like to add into this. When you feel ready, feel free to switch to the other side and perhaps experimenting with what that feels like. Different sides of the body likely will feel different. We're not always symmetrical, and that's okay. And perhaps changing sides when you feel ready, just recognizing the choice in this, the choice in the intensity of how much you'd like to turn, how much you're able to turn. And of course, if this doesn't feel like something you want to do at all, that's totally okay too. Perhaps noticing your breath. And if it feels more comfortable or accessible to hold on to a different part of your body, please feel welcome to do that. And perhaps just noticing what this felt like, what it felt like to turn your torso, turn your body to the side, maybe in a way that we're not often moving throughout our day. Just noticing what that feels like. Maybe there's a stretch, maybe there's some sensation. That's okay. And perhaps from here, we transition into more of a spinal stretch, kind of this gentle spinal movement. So I'm going to put my hands on my kneecaps and kind of use that as gentle leverage, but arching my back, and I wish you could see it, but arching my back and kind of bringing my chest forward. And if you're able, looking up towards the ceiling. And perhaps just noticing what that's like, very gently, in a way, arching your back. And of course, doing it in a way that feels accessible and safe for you. And perhaps doing the opposite of more a rounded back. So maybe the top of your back is more rounded. Maybe you're looking down. whatever feels comfortable and doable for you. Perhaps alternating that and maybe noticing what it feels like to stretch your body in this way. Perhaps you experiment with how much to lift your head, or how much to tuck your chin toward your chest. Perhaps noticing the different sensations when you move in different ways. Noticing that you have a choice of how often you change forms, the speed with which you move, the choice to do this or not do it at all. That's okay. Perhaps adding in any sort of other movement into your spine that feels accessible, feels nourishing, feels good for your body. Noticing all the different ways that you can move. Perhaps you notice your breath. And perhaps we return to our natural form of just noticing how our body feels. Recognizing all the various ways that you can move your body and make choices of how you want to move and the intensity of movement, intensity of stretch, perhaps, just noticing. And if we have time for one more form, I'm going to, so I'm extending one leg. I'm going to move forward just a little bit. My right leg is extended straight on the floor while towards the floor, while my left leg is bent. And I'm just gonna have my hands on the tops of my thighs and just experiment with tilting forward just a little bit. And perhaps noticing how this feels in your body. You can alternate legs when you feel ready. Perhaps just noticing a sensation maybe in the back of your leg that's straight. Perhaps playing with how much you want to tilt or if you want to tilt at all. So much of this practice is about experimenting and playing. I like to use the word play because I think often as adults we don't have enough play in our lives, and so this is kind of playing around with what feels good for your body, and experimenting in ways that you can move in different shapes, different forms. And perhaps just developing this awareness of what it's like to be in your body, what it feels like. Perhaps you play around with how much you straighten your leg or bend it, or of course, if anything else feels accessible, please feel free to do that. And when you feel ready, perhaps we come back to our natural form, this kind of home form, I want to call it. Not to get too crunchy, but this form that we keep returning to. But noticing at this point, we're coming towards the end of our practice, and noticing what your body feels like right now, perhaps noticing what your mind feels like, noticing what your breath is like. Noticing if there are any other parts of your body that need some attention and need some movement. And please feel empowered to tend to that, whatever your body needs. Perhaps checking in with yourself, how you feel in this moment, in contrast to how you felt when we first began. Perhaps things feel a bit different, perhaps nothing feels different. It's okay. And perhaps scanning from your body, maybe starting at the top of your head, going through your body and down to your feet. Perhaps just noticing what your body feels like in this moment. And when you've reached your feet, perhaps we scan the other way. So from your feet all the way up to your head. And perhaps when you feel ready, we can all come back together and check in and see how this felt, see how you're feeling, see how this was for you. And so please feel free to unmute yourselves. I would love to hear from everyone how they're doing, how they're feeling, what this was like. Spending a little bit of time on your body.
I feel rested.
Wonderful.
I would
Can
say
I
at
ask
the,
you, what is it? Oh, sorry, Matt.
go ahead.
I was just wondering, Anne, if I could ask you, what does it feel like to feel rested?
Well, I am prone to put more effort into something than what my body wants to do. So I always think of stretching as this big thing I've got to do. And I just notice how much in doing this, how much stretching I did, but at the kind of micro scale.
Yeah.
And that I kept stretching even when I had stretched as far as I thought I could, but I wasn't making a lot of effort. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because it was as if I went up and then, oh, I can stretch here and I can stretch here. And then I can stretch back here. It was very interesting to see all the places where my body was willing to stretch. And I wasn't putting this big effort into it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so, we think of these maybe stretching or exercising as this big thing that we need to do, that we should be doing. But when we really tune in and kind of listen to our bodies and get a sense of what our body needs, we might kind of get a better understanding of how to attend to that part.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, it's got to be a really strong stretch or it's got to be a really intense workout or whatever it is. Noticing what our body needs, and that changes. Thank you so much.
I noticed a place where I have an injury, and I operate on top of that hurt all the time. And it's interesting because it's not enough of a hurt to stop me. But if I stop and pay attention to it, I'm aware that it's there. And the more I stretched, the better it felt. So yeah, so that was really interesting to notice. Another thing I noticed was that very quickly on, I wanted to yawn and yawn and yawn, and about halfway through, I wanted to go to sleep. And I often don't notice that I'm tired either. So it was good to pay attention like that.
Yeah, our bodies can tell us so much. Often we're just moving so quickly through our day that we don't tune in. We don't kind of pause and listen to what our body's trying to tell us. You might just have more caffeine.
Exactly.
Not really fixing the problem, right? Noticing what our body is trying to say of, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I need to rest. Yeah, thank you.
What I was going to say was that it's a running joke with my significant other and I that like I keep all my tension in my shoulders, and like sometimes I won't even realize that I'm sitting kind of like this. And when we first started doing the arm movements, I could feel like my shoulders like getting less tense and also not hurting, but you could feel a little soreness to them because I was moving them in a way that I normally don't, especially now after working all day long. It's not something I typically spend time like addressing enough.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
I really enjoyed spending all this time just showering my body with all this attention, because I think we just don't pay any attention to our bodies as we move through the day. And it just feels like a little bit of heaven being able to spend even just a little bit of time doing this. And it feels like such a big difference from when we started to, ending, which I didn't want it to end. I feel like I could just do this for many more hours. And it, like everyone else said, it didn't, or like someone else said, it didn't feel like a lot of effort, but I felt like my body received a lot of benefit from it.
Thank you. I'm so glad. It's just, I think it's so interesting. Just by doing some movement, we learn so much about what our bodies need. Every time that I come back to this, wow, the body has so much information to tell us.
What I liked about it is I like that it's very choice-based. So I think one of the things that always gets me with yoga is the like cued breathing. And I feel like for me, that almost like makes me more anxious. So when you were telling us to be like very choiceful with our own breathing, that almost made me feel more relaxed.
Yeah, it's something, a bit of a power dynamic when somebody tells you how to breathe. And so through this, of course, through this kind of yoga, I don't want there to be any sort of power dynamic, right? I'm right here practicing with you, experimenting with my body as much as, I invite you to experiment with yours. And it's one of the challenges of different types of yoga is the different kinds of power dynamics that exist. And so that's something I just, I wanted to name and acknowledge. And hopefully this felt like an equal yoga practice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel rested and I feel very sleepy.
Good. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful.
I thought we lost you there
I'm
for a
so
second,
grateful.
Ted. I thought you were sleeping.
I'm so grateful for everyone joining here, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much for having me. And
Thank you.
I hope you're able to take something and, even if it's just like a little something, and practice it through your day, and just kind of check out what that feels like for you. Anybody have any questions for me? Anything that I can answer? Anything I can help
Can
with?
we do it again? Not right now,
love
but
to.
I mean, another time.
I would love to.
It can be backed by popular demand.
Here, here.
I also thank you. I also just want to acknowledge, if anybody is interested, this is, you can see it. It's a book by David Emerson. This is an individual who I trained with years ago from the Trauma Center, formerly called the Trauma Center, now called the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. He specifically works on trauma sensitive yoga. And so a lot of the forms that we practiced were from this book. And so I wanted to acknowledge David's contribution for us, to us here. It's such a community practice. So I'm really grateful that we were able to do this, and grateful for everyone that joined and spent time together. And I'm so deeply grateful for this. Thank you. This has been a dream of mine. So I'm so happy that we were able to do this.
We're glad to have had you. I think it was great timing, and it was luck, I think, in some ways, that we kind of came across one another. So I hope to bring you back again. And you'll definitely get the invite for sure. We'll make sure you're back because we want to make sure we can reach more people. So I think we'll see what we can do.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Take good care. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.